Doopy was at a Halloween party sleepover, and she suggested they make a prank call. Her friend was a little hesitant to do it, but she said yes. She gave Doopy a number to call and she called it. When the person picked up, he sounded familiar, but being the naive girl she was, Doopy continued with the prank call. When he asked,
"Hello, who is this?"
she decided to reply with,
"Hey, babe. Want me to come over again so we can have fun like last time?"
He then said with a shaky voice,
Excuse me?"
Her friend then started giggling, and Doopy just took it as her laughing at the prank. She then said,
"Babe, you remember last night, right? When we fucked?"
She then heard him whimpering a bit and then respond with,
I'm just gonna hang up."
and then the line went dead. When she turned to her friend, she was laughing like crazy. She said, "Do you know who that was?" Doopy shook her head and said,
"No, not a clue."
Her friend laughed and said, "It was your crush." She then froze and facepalmed.
So Dolan used to have an annoying roommate who'd always talk about his ex-girlfriend, complain about everything, and every time Dolan's girlfriend Gooby stayed over, he would try to catch them doing the deed. But that aside, he would do two of the dumbest things. First, he would eat literally anything. Dolan eventually gave him the nickname Matter Eater Lad. He even got his roommate to eat an entire bottle of non-toxic toddler toothpaste. The second thing his roommate did was every night come into Dolan's room and whisper, "Dolan, there's a monster under my bed!" Dolan would tell him,
"If there were monsters, they would eat you, and I would be rid of you whiny ass."
Dolan knows that he's a terrible person.
Pandora's third grade gym teacher was the coolest. Before becoming a teacher, he was a juggler and an acrobat in a circus. He even taught them things he learned in the circus, like how to juggle. Possibly though, the coolest thing he did happened near the end of the year. He promised that if the students' grades were good enough, he would juggle flaming torches for them. And not surprisingly, he actually kept his promise and did a fire juggling routine at the end of the year.
For his first job, Pringle washed dishes in a busy restaurant. His boss was kind of crazy. She hated wasting food and would always complain when customers had any leftovers on their plates when they finished eating. Instead of scraping the leftovers into the bin, she would ask Pringle to finish whatever was left. At first, Pringle ate everything without hesitation, so his co-workers nicknamed him the garbage disposal. But when it kept happening every shift, Pringle realized he was starting to get fat. His boss wouldn't let him say no, so Pringle kept stuffing himself with other people's food every single night. In the end, he quit because he couldn't handle the constant stomach aches from overeating.
When McCallum was 12, he called some random pizza place. When they answered the phone, he made a girly voice to the guy.
"Hey baby, can I get some pizza with extra sausage?"
He said,
"Yeah, I got a full long sausage and some nice, wet, sticky sauce, babe."
McCallum didn't think he would believe him, but then the man said,
"Where do you live so we can get down and have a nice slice with my sausage, baby?"
McCallum was disgusted with this pervert, but then he started laughing in his kid voice. The guy got mad and started yelling. I heard another voice saying,
"Hey, shut the fuck up!"
in the background. McCallum hung up before anything else could happen. When McCallum was in high school, he was forced to participate in the game of Capture the Flag. His team was playing a great game, but the opponent seemed to have disappeared. After a while, he found the opponent's flag unguarded, covered in graffiti penises. He took the flag to the teacher, but the teacher thought it was him that had drawn the cartoon wings. The teacher told McCallum that for his punishment, he had to stand next to the flag and copy the flag's movement with his body. Everyone laughed as he stood next to a wiener flag, flapping his body in the wind.
One night, Nixiam was walking home when he heard two guys having a dumb argument just outside a block of apartments. Nixiam didn't want to get involved, so he kept his distance. Then, in the space of 5 seconds, the fight went from a shouting match to gunshots. One of the guys had pulled out a pistol and was firing it at the other guy's feet while screaming, "Dance till you're dead!" like some kind of cowboy. This kind of thing never happens in Nixiam's neighborhood, so at that point he decided to turn around and find another way home.
When Melissa was 7, her and her father stayed in a motel while on vacation. At midnight, she woke up and looked outside the window. She saw an ominous figure wearing a creepy mask. When Melissa glanced at the time, the figure was gone, but something was left behind. It was a piece of scrap metal that said, "You didn't see anything." Melissa thought,
He was probably trying to break in somewhere.
Just then, he appeared right outside her window and looked directly at her. She quickly ducked down, then looked up again, and he was gone. To this day, her family still does not believe her.
In high school, Pandora was a total loner who got bullied for being different. Her twin sister, on the other hand, was the total opposite. She was really popular and no one dared to mess with her. One day, Pandora's twin overheard a boy named Anthony plotting a mean prank he was going to pull on Pandora. Instead of confronting him, Pandora's twin decided to come in the next day pretending to be Pandora. Anthony mistook her for Pandora and assumed she wouldn't stand up for herself. Right as he was about to pull his prank, Pandora's twin punched him in the nose. Anthony was so shocked he started crying. From that day, no one ever messed with Pandora again. So Tolop found some spray paints in his garage, and this gave him a great idea. Why not vandalize the school? Great choice. On the weekend, he broke into his school, climbed on top of the roof, and painted a massive penis. His goal was for it to be seen on Google Earth. Not being satisfied with that, he then walked around and drew cocks and balls all over the place. Finally, on Monday, it was addressed to the school that it had been vandalized with genitals. Tolop was laughing his ass off right in front of his teacher. About 2 hours later, he was called up to the principal's office. At this point, he knew he was in some deep shit. The police came and interviewed him. He was grounded for 10 weeks and charged $1,200 for the cleanup.
One time, Tolop went to a funeral for a guy who died of alcoholism. After the service, the guests decided the best way to remember him was to throw a huge party and get completely wasted. 2 hours into the party, Tolop saw a young drunk guy run out of the kitchen, putting on a bad British accent and screaming,
"I'm the bloody United Kingdom, you bloody wankers! Respect me!"
He then ran outside and jumped into the above-ground pool fully clothed. When he came up for air, he shouted,
"You see, you bloody concubine? I'm the bloody United Kingdom. I'm a giant cup of tea."
Ever since that day, Tolop sees all above-ground pools as giant cups of tea. One day, Derek was sitting on the roof of his house when he saw a helicopter. The next thing he knew, he saw a small boulder falling towards him. It landed only inches away from his dick. Then, the same thing happened, only it was his girlfriend. Wearing a parachute, she had jumped out of the helicopter. Weirded out, Derek looked at the small boulder, which said, "Can I be your wife?" What the fuck? When Sweet Commando was a first year in the Air Force Training Corps, he spotted a girl at a color guard practice. She taught him how to carry the flag and march correctly. After this, when he'd see her in the hallway, they would talk. She was extremely weird and goofy. Sweet Commando absolutely loved it, but he assumed someone that great would already be taken. Her 6th period was right by his, so she started waiting for him after class. He thought that meant she must like him. Sweet Commando had feelings for her too, so he decided to ask her out. He was scared and didn't even say anything on their way to lunch. He sat down across from her in the cafeteria and said,
"Will you go out with me?"
so fast that she didn't understand him. He was hesitant to repeat it, but slowed his speech and asked her out again. She looked at him and said, "Yes!" Internally, he was screaming, and he just collapsed and fell on the table.
What's the dumbest thing I've seen people fight over? Oh, that one's easy. Video games. A long time ago, I invited some neighborhood friends over to play some Mario Kart. It's way more fun to play with people than the computer. The computer doesn't get competitive, it doesn't start arguments, and it certainly doesn't fight. So one of my friends was on a bit of a winning streak and getting a little bit cocky about it. My other friend who was constantly losing was getting a little bit angry about that. I knew the guy had a short temper, but after losing the last race, he started actually taking punches at my other friend. My friend who was winning the game was actually kind of a tough guy and was able to dodge punches really well. So while he was under assault, he was singing a really offensive song about the loser's mother to the theme of the victory music of Mario Kart. It was really hard not to laugh at this song. It was offensive and immature, and he was totally on key. I actually still remember the song, but I can't sing it here on YouTube. All of us laughing at the song was the last straw. He started breaking my controllers, so we had to kick him out. But I gotta say, that was the most fun I ever had playing Mario Kart. After Andy and her boyfriend Adam just got done doing the deed, she got a call from an unknown caller. He said, "Are you home?" Andy answered,
Yes.
The caller said, "That was a nice show," then hung up. About 5 minutes later, a rock crashed through her window. He called again, but Andy only heard him breathing. Suddenly, the power went out, and she got yet another call. The caller said, "I see you." Then Andy got a text on Facebook from an unknown user, and it was a picture of Andy in the dark with a hand in the corner of the screen holding a knife. Then she got a call, and he asked, "Wanna play?" At that point, Andy lost her shit, so she called 911. After that, he called again and said, "Big mistake. Look out of your living room window." Just then, she heard an upstairs window break. A few minutes later, the cops arrived, but they didn't find the guy.
When Pringle was about 11 years old, him and his family went to London. As they were driving, they hit something. Once they got out, Pringle started throwing up and crying because he didn't want to see a dying animal. But then, he looked under the back tires, and both tires were clean. He looked around and got back into the car with his family. As they drove away, he looked behind them, and he saw two red eyes staring at him. It had a horrifying grin with messed up teeth. And Pringle, well, he never went to London again.
Salty Squid was sitting in his biology class on the first day of high school. He didn't know anyone because he had just moved to the area. The teacher asked everyone to stand up and tell the class about something cool they did over the summer. Salty Squid panicked when it came close to his turn because he thought he was a boring person. When his turn came, he stood up and out of nowhere blurted out, "I was on an ice hockey team for a week or two." The entire class stared at him with "what the fuck" looks. The teacher was trying hard not to laugh but asked, "Ice hockey?" Salty Squid didn't know shit about sports at the time, but it suddenly dawned on him that ice hockey was a winter sport. It's a moment that continues to haunt him to this day.
So Honeybits met this guy through some friends of friends. On their first date, he was a complete gentleman, opening doors for her, pulling out a chair and paying for their meal. Honeybits was so impressed that she agreed to a second date. On that second date, they went to the mall. They were getting along great, enjoying the time, until he dropped a bomb that he believed he could talk to Satan. He claimed that he had demons in his head who could tell him about all the gruesome ways he could kill people. Fearing for her life, Honeybits immediately shut the relationship down and got with another guy a few months later. But her satanic ex wasn't ready for things to end. He tracked down Honeybits' new man and stood at his door in silence. The cops were called and the crazy Satanist left with just a warning. Honeybits blocked him on every media site and hasn't seen or heard from him since, which means he's still out there.
This plagues Shima from time to time. Sometimes she sees food on the ground or in the trash and, it looks so good. It's either something she knows is normally delicious, or it's something that looks virtually untouched. Like an untouched piece of pizza just lying on top of a bed of trash. She can tell in many instances that it's probably fine to eat, since the plate or tray is right under it, but Shima will be damned if she's caught digging in the trash like that. So much good food is wasted, and Shima wants to eat it. When Pandora was 19, she went to a friend's house to have a few drinks. She was new to drinking, so was still a bit of a lightweight and ended up getting really drunk really quickly. At the end of the night, Pandora decided to walk home since it was only 3 streets away. But in her drunken state, she kept getting lost, so her 2-minute trip home became a stumbly walk all over the neighborhood. Eventually, she found her house, but then she realized she'd left her keys in her room. Pandora bent down to pick up a pebble to toss at her parents' window. But as soon as she did this, she felt like she was literally falling off the face of the earth. Drunk Pandora grabbed onto her lawn and screamed, "Help! I'm drunk and I don't want to fall off! Let me in!" Pandora's parents woke up and let her in, but they were beyond pissed. The next morning, Pandora had to suffer through a painful hour-long lecture while she was still hungover.
Salty Squid gave some very bad advice to his friend when they were little. He told his friend that he would get superpowers if he ever got electrocuted. A few days later, his friend really wanted to get superpowers, so he grabbed a fork and stuck it in an electrical socket. His friend ended up being sent to the hospital. Salty Squid didn't see his friend for a while after that, only learning later on what had happened.
Andy's mom works for the local police. She had just gotten off duty and didn't have time to take off her uniform before she had to go Christmas shopping. When they went to Walmart to buy presents for their family, Andy's 8-year-old sister found a toy she really liked and started begging for it. Eventually, she started whining and throwing a huge fit. Andy's mom yelled at her, but that just escalated the situation. The tantrum got so bad that Andy's mom snapped and handcuffed her little sister to escort her out of the store.
One day, when Hellbent was a teenager, he walked down the stairs in his apartment building. Suddenly, he tripped and tumbled all the way to the bottom, landing on the solid concrete. He found himself bleeding from his head and nose and was too weak to get up. A couple of people looked out their doors to see what all the noise was about. They saw the poor demon lying on the ground bleeding and unable to move, and instead of helping, they just went back inside their apartments. One of them even yelled at him to be quiet. Hellbent thought they could have at least asked if he was alright, but they didn't care. He wasn't sure if they were too busy, too lazy, or if they thought that trying to help someone would be a lot of work. But what Hellbent knew was that they were assholes. He eventually got up and limped back to his home where his mum patched him up.
In 6th grade, Civil Spider was in love with one of the most popular girls in school. Even though he was a huge nerd with no idea on how to talk to girls, he decided one day to let her know how he felt. After a lot of thinking, he came up with the most epic, romantic gesture he could think of: using the dictionary. He spent 2 days going through the entire dictionary, finding words like beautiful and amazing. He highlighted about 20 words and left bookmarks on the appropriate pages. Then, at the end of class, he left the dictionary on her desk with a note that said, "This is what I think of you." His crush took the dictionary home and, well, she probably had a big laugh about it with her friends. She never responded or even mentioned it to Civil Spider, which totally broke his heart. He now realizes how awkward he was at flirting. When Hellbent babysat his 2 nieces a few years back, he had to drive them to and from school and wherever else they needed to go. But the only song they wanted to hear in the car was Let It Go from the movie Frozen. Hellbent hated that song at the time, but eventually, he kinda grew to like it. He made the mistake of telling his sister as much when she got back. Now, she promised not to tell anybody, but her friend apparently overheard them. The next thing Hellbent knew, a post proclaiming his love for Let It Go was trending on Facebook.
One day, Froggy and her sister fought over something very dumb. The fight was intense, so intense that their father heard it from the garage when he climbed out of his car. They stopped fighting when they heard their father stomping upstairs. While Froggy's sister was sent to her room, their father had something special in mind for Froggy. She had to chug as many bottles of ketchup that he could buy. It turned out that her father could buy a lot of bottles. When her punishment was over, Froggy didn't feel very well.
When they were teenagers, Danger Dolan and his girlfriend Gooby were playing with a Ouija board. Nothing spooky happened, and they got tired, so they went to bed. But around 4 AM, Dolan heard his bedroom door being opened. He went to wake up Gooby, but he realized she wasn't there. He laughed and called out, "Very funny, Gooby, I can see you in the corner." He could see a black outline of a person in the corner of the room standing there. It started moving closer to him. It moved right up to his face and he could feel its breath on his cheek. After what seemed like forever, the figure turned around and walked out of the room. A few seconds later, Gooby came back in the room with a glass of water, confused why Dolan looked like he'd seen a ghost. Shima was once blamed for making someone else fail a science test. Even when she was a freshman at high school, Shima had a reputation for being one of the smartest students around. One student noticed and decided to copy every one of Shima's answers on a science test they were doing. Fortunately, Shima's teacher realized what was going on. He gave the cheater a big fat 0 and a note that said, "You answered everything wrong." The cheater was furious and blamed Shima for causing them to fail. When Shima got her marks back, she received a perfect grade. The cheater was absolutely baffled by this. It just shows that cheaters never prosper.
This one time, Nixium was at Walmart with his mum, dad, and kid sister. His sister was eating a large box of fries as they moved around the store, but she was having a bit of trouble eating and walking at the same time. And Nixium saw her drop a few fries along the way. When they turned around to see how many she dropped, Nixium saw a little 8-year-old kid was picking them up off the floor and eating them. Nixium and his sister started intentionally leaving a trail, and the kid followed them like a seagull. This went on for a while until suddenly the kid's 600-pound mother appeared. She screamed,
"Oh, stop eating candy off the ground,"
and caused a big scene. Nixium laughed so hard he almost cried.
Pringle has clinical anxiety, so when he gets nervous, his knee starts bouncing up and down uncontrollably. One night in high school, Pringle had a huge test that he was freaking out about. He was struggling with a lot of the questions, so his knee started banging really fast into the underside of the desk. Apparently, it looked like Pringle was masturbating. Some of the other kids noticed this and spent the next few weeks teasing Pringle about jerking it in class. Ever since that day, Pringle has tried to stop the habit.
Sometime in Ghost Toast's youth, he was playing games at his friend's house along with his friend's girlfriend. After a while, his friend got up from the couch and told his girlfriend to come help him with something in the room. Ghost Toast didn't think much of this until he started to hear bed springs creaking from his friend's room. Ghost Toast sheepishly decided to eavesdrop on his friend's escapades. His ear was pressed to the wall. "I think we should break up," said his friend, followed by a loud, masculine moan. A few seconds later, the girl marched through the door and out of the house to her car. She was stark naked except for the clothes she was holding in front of the important parts. Ghost Toast's friend appeared at the doorway with a tissue box covering his dick and commented, "It's for the better." When Gooby was about 5 or 6, she had a babysitter who was about 80 years old. Her parents went away for a weekend holiday and left Gooby with the elderly babysitter for a few days. Gooby woke up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water when she heard a weird noise, so she decided to investigate. She went downstairs and looked outside into the garden. Lying in the middle of the grass was her elderly babysitter in complete darkness, stroking a teddy bear. She went outside to see what she was doing, and the lady just said, "What a nice day it is out here." Old people, am I right?
One night, Pringle had a weird, nonsensical dream where he was in a factory. On the production line were several clones of his friends. When he walked into another room, Pringle saw an orange entity which suddenly vanished. Startled, he left the room. Instead of walking back to where he started, he found himself in a forest. He also saw a strange machine which one of his friends was standing on. The machine zapped Pringle's friend, shrinking him down to a microscopic size before blowing him up into a 3-inch mushroom cloud. That was when Pringle was knocked out. When he came to, he found himself in a hallway with a viewing area above it. There, he saw all of his friends who were staring at him. That was when he was woke up to the sound of his dog barking, something he's thankful for to this day.
When Gooby was little, she had the same terrible nightmare every night. In the dark, she'd open her eyes to see a giant knight in a thick suit of armor. The knight would stand there completely still, just watching her sleep for the entire night. Gooby could never fall asleep after she noticed him because she was terrified he would do something. When morning came, sunlight poured into Gooby's room. Gooby then saw the knight had been hiding a giant axe that had skulls engraved on its blade. Gooby screamed as the knight lifted the axe up and tried to kill her with it. She'd roll out of bed and wake up in terror on the floor. Because this nightmare happened every night, Gooby never got enough sleep and had permanent bags under her eyes.
Back when he lived with his parents, a weird rule that Derek had to follow was not entering the kitchen. It might seem normal to some, but the problem was that the backyard was past the kitchen. So, in order to go outside and play, Derek would have to get his dad to pick him up and carry him through the kitchen and to the backyard. When Derek got older and too heavy for him to carry, his dad just followed him through the kitchen. It was very awkward when his dad lurked behind him whenever he fixed himself something to eat.
Back when I was a kid, I remember my mom and dad would be so mean to me sometimes, yelling at me and telling me to clean my room and all that stuff. So I had a journal, a secret journal that I kept, that I would write bad things about my parents in, where I would call them names and say they were dumb and how I didn't need them and, all that stuff that we did when we were younger. so I'd write all that stuff down. But one day, my mom, she came into my room and was cleaning it, and she found the journal. She went through pages and pages of curse words, insults, slander, anything that I could write in there, terrible pictures that I had drawn of them, so much stuff. And needless to say, I got in a lot of trouble. I didn't see the light of day for the next several years.